At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soulblazer.
Hello, everybody. This is Greg, joined always by Joe.
Hello.
Super NES podcast, episode number 255 for this time around. We are doing the sequel to a game that we covered recently on the podcast. We don't usually cover sequels this fast, but it kind of made sense in this case since two games are very, very different. That it was okay to do these in a relatively short period of order, because it's like there are different types of games. You really wouldn't be burned out upon doing the same kind of game over and over and over again. So we do look at that when trying to set up our structure for podcasting games. But anyway, we're covering the sequel to Drakken, which I think we covered 2 episodes ago on the podcast.
Yes.
So about a month ago at this point, called Dragon View, which as already mentioned before is a very different game. I played this game back when it first came out because I was really a fan of Drakken. I wanted to see how this game was. Joe, of course, did not. This is the first time. His first time like the game. So. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the differences. The history of this game, and which segues over to the differences. The differences is very nice. So I'm assuming you've listened to the episode of Drakken. If you have not, may want to listen to that one first. I will cover briefly. Drakken was a very early Super NES first-person perspective game, which is very unique for the time period because the whole outer world was in a free-moving first-person perspective, and then for the castles, the dungeons, it switched to a side-scrolling 2D perspective instead. It moved around from room to room. So, very abstract game, very computerish because the game originally was a computer game before being ported to Super NES. So it shows its roots there, and Joe and I differed a little bit upon our opinion upon the game, but both of us were impressed by how graphically impressive the game was at the time period, and how Drakken really was a groundbreaking game for the kind of RPGs we'd see later on down the line in later years that did the same kind of open world first person perspective viewpoint of games games that followed in the Elder Scrolls and the Fallout franchises, for example. So and the game teased right at the end of the game, continuing Drakken 2. So even back then, developers were hoping to make a sequel, and there was a sequel being worked on by Infogrames, the French company that developed the first game. But for some reason, in 1991, the game was quietly canceled. I couldn't find a solid reason online why that happened. The first game did sell very well, so obviously there was a desire to make a sequel to a game, but for some reason their sequel never actually went anywhere. So Kemco was a Japanese publisher who were the ones who had taken the original computer game, ported it to Super NES, and released it worldwide. And they also had done pretty well on success of that game, because it was a very early Super NES title. And they're like, well, if they're not going to make a sequel, we'll make a sequel. So they tasked one of their in development houses called I think it's pronounced the Kochibuki System to develop a sequel to the game, which took a few years, but finally was finished and released in August 1994 in Japan, and to drive home to the public that this was a sequel despite being a very different game. They call it Super Drakken in Japan. So, but for some reason, when the game got released in North America a few months later in November, the name of the game was changed to Dragon View. Again, I could not find a solid reason online why that happened. I guess I guess they felt that because the game was so different to Drakken, that they probably would be better off putting the game under a different name for its North American release. And it never got released in Europe, though. Ironically enough, considering the first game was a European developed game. The fact the sequel never got released in PAL Land is interesting. But anyway, so Drakken 2, aka Dragon View, which is what I'll call it for the rest of this podcast, is a very different game, as I already mentioned too. This is instead a side-scrolling role-playing beat-em-up game for the most part. So to describe the game, I'm going to use comparisons to other games. I'm curious, Joe, to see if you agree with me or not on this. The biggest difference, the biggest tie into Drakken and where anybody who's played the first game will see the most similarity is the open world, at the countryside. You still explore the world in an open world, first person perspective game a la Drakken. It's pretty much the same engine as the Drakken used. So that's this game has the strongest tie to the original game with. Everything else, though, is very different. This outer world, for example, is not like a dead, lifeless world like it was in Drakken. This one's much more active. It's more vibrant. You see more objects here. The color scheme's like a bit better. There's towns and there's stuff you can see also like this perspective. And when you go in dungeons, it's still a sideways 2D perspective like it was in Drakken. But whereas Drakken used static screens, in Dragon View you're instead going you're actually scrolling left to right, exploring rooms and fighting monsters. I saw a comparison to Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link as far as gameplay went. I think it's probably the best analogy I can think of as for what this gameplay feels like to me. So
yeah, that's fair.
But also you also could compare it to Xanadu, Castlevania 2, some of the Ys games. I think Ys 3, for example, also play similar to this. So there are a number of games which also this reminds me of. But I think Zelda 2 is the strongest comparison I can think of as far as how the gameplay is in this one. So, and why the gameplay change was made, I'm not sure. The developer Kemco probably felt they wanted to show off they wanted to show off the system a bit more because the game is more graphically processor heavy intensive than the original game was, and I think that they wanted to make it more to appeal to the more action RPG kind of Zelda-ish / Castlevania kind of game style a gameplay with this one to make for a more action oriented game. So now yes, so now we've explained the setup and how everything was changed from the original game, either what was kept the same or what was different. I predicted Joe would like this game a little bit better because it's more of an action RPG as opposed to the original game. So I'm curious to hear how right I am. So Joe, what was your first time perspective on this game?
Yeah, so much like the first game, don't worry about the story. It's so simple and it's forgotten really easy.
Yeah,
it's
a very cookie cutter Japanese style, very cliche, roll your eyes at dialogue line. There's a story, and there's a story at least here, and they do try. It's not terrible, but just very forgettable. So
yeah. I mean, it boils down to Alex, who's the protagonist that you're playing as, is basically set to rescue his girlfriend Katarina, who is kidnapped by an evil, powerful wizard, Argos. What I do like about this is the story is told as if you are being read a story.
Yes, it's third-person perspective. It's very
and I thought that was
novelized
very good.
Style. It's very nice.
So that's cool because it's the events already happened. You're just playing out the events that.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. I also want to give a quick shout out to the ending. This is actually a very unique ending this game has. I don't know if you finished the game, Joe, but it's
I did not.
They actually gave an ending. They actually gave an ending to the end of this game. Not only tie up most loose ends, but the end of this game is 26 minutes long. For a Super NES game, That's unheard of for an ending that
Right.
long. So kudos to developers at least for that as well, because I want to give them on. Because I want to give a shout out for that, for like that as well. Definitely, like while we're talking about the story. So
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead, please.
So one of the biggest things I complained about with the first game was just traveling in that game and getting used to the overworld, and even some of the dungeon exploration. This game improves on that. I felt traveling in this game, especially on the overworld, was so much easier. And a large part of that is the fact that you are given a map, and on top of that map, you acquire smaller maps that you can get from NPCs, which kind of do like a hyper focus on a certain area. And, as you progress, you get more maps and whatnot. The smaller maps do a really good job of actually having a path that is there in the 3D model, like it's represented by a road or whatever. But it gives you a direction of where you're going. And obviously, with your compass, you can kind of figure out where you can go. I thought it was really cool that there are teleport spots.
Mhm.
Big caveat for that. I went through the game. I went pretty far. Like I got to like I got through the ice dungeon. So I did the fire and the ice dungeon. And I could not figure out how to activate the portals. So I ended up having to hoof it back and forth the long way. So I got to know the main map pretty well, needless to say. But I thought it was cool that it's there. I'm sure there's something that I was missing, and it's quite possible I did not look at a guide. I didn't try to do any of that. I tried to do this as if I had a Super Nintendo back then, and like my only saving grace was my brain and my experience with these games. And for the most part, I did pretty well. But yeah, I just couldn't figure out how to activate the teleporter and get that working. But I digress. So combat now is done side scrolling beat 'em up when you're in the dungeons, which is actually really nice, and you have options. So you start with a sword, and you have the option to be able to do up thrusts to be able to hit flying enemies. Um, there's also like it's a spinning blade. I can't remember the name of it. It was like the Argus or something like not
Something like
Argus.
that,
That's
yeah.
that's the wizard. But anyways, so it's a double bladed like circular thing that you can throw, and it's basically think of it as like a boomerang. So if you want, you can throw it high, and then it can come back to you and actually hit the enemy from behind. Or you can throw it forward, jump up a little bit more, and hitting a flying enemy at the same time. There's different options there. Um, all those can be upgraded. Your armor can be upgraded as you upgrade these things. The presentation changes, your appearance changes, which is pretty cool. I like the fact that you actually see the progression of your character as you're leveling up. That was definitely something that you really didn't see in the first game. Um, the other options that you have is magic. As you travel and go through the dungeons, you'll get different magical rings. There's only three, so don't get too excited. But there is a fire ring, there's an ice ring, and then the one I did not get to acquire is they have a lightning ring. But when I watched some gameplay, it looked pretty cool. Um, Changing weapons can be a little cumbersome, so I always suggest when you get into the dungeon, because usually that first screen, once you get into the dungeon, you're not going to encounter any enemies. Um, it's there where you're going to want to hit the start button and go through the menu and equip what you want. It's kind of cumbersome to do that, like, and it's kind of slow and clunky, I guess is the best way to explain it. Um, so it's like you don't want to do it during combat. Granted, yes, the action pauses and you can do it and you're not going to get hit like 100 times, but it's still kind of time consuming to get in there and do what you got to do. Um, Once you get used to it, it gets a little easier, but just equip your stuff beforehand. That's the best way to do it. What was the other thing? Oh, when you actually get into rooms in the dungeons, you immediately know how many enemies you have in front of you, whether you can see them or not, because their life bars will be represented, which is really nice. Because there was a couple times where I got into a room and like I saw one flying thing, flying around, but then, if you scroll over more, there's a couple other enemies off on the screen. But if you look just above your health bar, there's actually individual bars for each enemy, which is also a nice thing that I liked here, is that you can see your enemy's health. So you can strategize a little bit as far as how you want to attack and prepare for that fight, which is really nice. Man, difficulty. This one's tricky. So I did see a couple videos where people complained about the difficulty. So here's my thing. I thought the game starts off a little difficult. And I don't mean like, oh my god, you're gonna die like so much. It's just you're gonna take damage. You're gonna have to use potions. That's just how it is. But as you progress and you go and you to like there's and you understand it when you play the game, but there's like like caves that are marked on the map, but they're not marked on the map, if that makes sense. Like they're not specifically pointed at, but there is clearly a cave in the mountain that you can go to, but there's no like indicator that it's there. So you can go into things like that, and there are health power-ups, there are armor power-ups, there's weapon upgrades, there is your magic upgrades, things of that nature. So those will help you obviously get better as far as your character building goes. So yes, the game can be a little daunting to begin with if you're not prepared. But if you take the time to explore, I found myself pretty OP before I got to even the fire dungeon, and was pretty handedly being able to go in there and clear it out, including killing the boss with no issue. So it's one of those, like, it's how you want to play the game, which I kind of like. They give you that option. You can go running in and, sword swinging, not singing, and you could take your damage and use your potions to heal or whatever, or you can explore the little towns and go into every single building and talk to every NPC, go into these mystery caves that aren't labeled, and find these upgrades. And then when you go into the dungeon, you're swinging your sword wildly, but they're not putting up much of a fight. And it can make it pretty easy.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I agree with you, like, about all of that, because it's like, I think people, again, I think the analogy here to Zoe 2 is apt, because it's like, you don't have to grind in Zoe 2, but grinding a little bit here and there is really helpful later on later on the game. Again, same thing here. If you take the time just to grind in some areas, there are many areas where you can just stand at the entrance of the room and enemies will come at you. Especially if you have like a distant weapon like the boomerang, the boomerang blade you were talking about. You can stand there for a few minutes and just kill everything coming at you, not take any damage, and like you level up like pretty that way. So so if you're willing, take a few minutes here and there just to level up. It really does help later on down the road. So I think the game can be difficult in parts. Some of the boss fights can definitely be tricky, I think, but the overall difficulty of the game, I don't think it's too high. And also to add to that, I think that the controls felt spot on. The hit detection seemed great. The controls, the controls were responsive. The gameplay itself just felt good. It just felt like it's focused. it's nowhere near as confusing like as Drakken is. It's just like it's very it's a simpler game than Drakken is, which some people like may disagree. Which some people like me may be disappointed by if they came in from Drakken expecting Drakken 2, but but the gameplay for what it is, it's very solid, it's tight, and just just feels like fun in the hands. I think it's not groundbreaking like the original the original game was, but for what it is, like they're very solid.
Yeah, and like I said, the biggest issue I had with the game is that a lot of the stuff like that you're doing and quests that you have to do is a lot of backtracking, which again with the portal, not an issue because I saw gameplay where people were actually using the portals and it's like instantaneous. It's super nice to be able to get around. Like backtracking is just not a huge thing. For me, unfortunately, with my experience, backtracking was a huge pain in the butt. So, but I do want to put that caveat out there that clearly I'm an idiot and could not figure out how the portals work. And if you have the portals working, it's actually a lot easier. So the one thing that I am griping about this game can be mitigated.
They probably didn't take a look at the manual either, did you?
Yeah.
But that's fine. Yeah, it's like again, backtracking for quests is very common in games at this time period, so it's like you kind of expect that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, the game's not too long if you know what you're doing. The Let's Plays online for this game are around 7.5 hours, give or take. So I mean, it's not like like first time through, maybe you're maybe you're about maybe you're like 10 to 15 hours, but it's not a particularly like long game to play. Graphics and music. Graphics in this game are great. I think they really, for mid like Super NES game, I think the game looks like very pretty. The icons, especially you and the monsters, are very large and defined and colorful. The improved interface bar takes to the bottom half of the screen is easy to read at a glance. It looks good. Yeah, we already talked about the outer world, how that's been improved. So, there's some nice shading going on in some of the towns and caves with fog effects and whatnot to the background or parallax scrolling. Some of the enemies are taller than you, which are very intimidating. You're trying to fight a guy like bigger and stronger than you, so visually, it's a very nice effect. Graphically the game's gorgeous. Music is all right. I mean, the soundtrack's not amazing, but it's a very solid, decent enough soundtrack for the kind of game it is.
Yeah. So graphically, there's two sides of the coin here. So the overworld, your general map, is very much like Drakken. It's got a little bit more detail and
the towns and shrubbery and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you can get stuck on that stuff, which is kind of annoying, but minor gripes. That being said, you are 100% right. The upgrade in graphics when you're in the dungeons and doing the side-scrolling stuff is like chef's kiss, like amazing. They did such a good job. Your character sprite looks amazing. Like I said, the actual visual upgrade that you see as you upgrade just makes it feel that much better when you're doing it. And then yes, the enemies. I mean, just the first boss alone, that little scorpion thing that you fight, amazing. They did such a good job. There's so much detail there. There was actually a point where I paused the game to actually look at the scorpion model because I couldn't believe that they actually put that much detail into it. Because some of the other enemies that you come across are detailed enough, and you kind of get what they are. But the scorpion was really the first large sprite that you come across, and you can actually see all the little details and stuff. So that was really good. Ultimately, the music is just kind of meh. It kind of felt like the first Drakken game where it's there, it's serviceable, but also forgettable. Sound effects are pretty good. Can't complain about that. I mean, overall, this is exactly what I want in a sequel. Like, this is a huge upgrade compared to the first game. And this is exactly what a sequel should be. When someone says this is a sequel to something, it should be bigger, it should be better, it should be more beautiful. I really wish they would have worked a little bit more on that music, because I think that would have made this, dare I say, a perfect game. But it's still a great game. Um, and yeah, I all around. I think even with the negatives that I do have on this game, it doesn't compare to the first game at all. So I all around it's positive.
The only slight knock I give about the graphics is that the graphics is that like Draken, when you're on the overworld, there can be some frame rate issues trying to move
Yeah.
around because
Yep.
if you move around because because it forces your brain, it's like you push its limits at this point, because it's like that's why the screen only takes like half the screen. That's why the views that's why the overworld view is only half the screen, because it's like that's pretty much like all our handle. So
Yeah.
unless we're using some advanced technology like Super FX chip or something. But yeah, so that sequel talk is interesting. I guess maybe we'll get into that like right now, since we're kind of getting to like later on ground, because the game reviewed pretty well when it came out. Not amazing scores, but like solid scores. Just to give you some examples, EGM gave a 7 out of 10. GamePro gave a 3.6 out of 5. Megathon gave 75%. Nintendo Power gave 3.3 out of 5. RPG Fan gave 75%. So like average to above average scores. Not like not like amazing scores, but like but solid scores. However, you have to remember when this game came out to North America, November '94. There were some heavy hitters on the market at this time, and this game being sold in store shelves alongside the likes of like Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy 0, Final Fantasy 3, Super Metroid, Earthworm Jim, and Mortal Kombat 2. I mean, what chance does this game have against those? So, because of that, the game did not sell very well, unfortunately. And therefore is a pretty expensive game to get nowadays if you want a physical copy, which we'll get into here toward the end when we talk pricing. But if it had come out, if the game had come out earlier in the system lifespan, if it hadn't taken 2+ years for Kemco to make a sequel, maybe the game would have sold better. But another complaint I heard from people back then was that this was advertised as being a sequel to Drakken, but except that outer world, it really didn't have anything to do with Drakken, because everything else in the game was very different. So people who were a fan of the original game, and mind you, because Drakken was such an early Super NES game, a lot of people played it. A lot of people checked out this game thinking it'd be more of the same, and were disappointed to find out that it wasn't, and that didn't help sales either. So it's like, for people who didn't like the first game very much, like you, this game was amazing. For people like me who came expecting more of the same, were like, well, this is not Drakken, but because it's a very, very different game. We didn't know about the time, different developers, that kind of stuff, which makes a lot of sense in hindsight. However, I still enjoyed the game for what it was. I just felt the game I just felt the game should not be advertised as being like a sequel to Drakken, because again, except that other world, it really has nothing else to do with Drakken. It's like it was even like maybe the same people. So
Right.
So I think that didn't help things either as far as sales went. But well, like it is what it is. But Kemco did make, I think, a solid game here. I think they did the right thing, I think, in renaming the game from Drakken from Super Drakken to Dragon View here in North America. But just for those reasons, the game not really being a true sequel to a game a lot of people played and loved, and also because of the fact that so many other great games were on the shelves at the same time this came out. Those things together conspired to make this a game that unfortunately did not sell very well, despite reviewing very well. So but which is unfortunate, but like it is what it is. It does happen. Sorry. It has happened before with some games, and it's going to happen again with others, I'm sure. But yeah, so also the opening, right away, the opening screen, the title screen, great graphics. Like, it's really just right at the very start, the game really wows you with the graphical ability this game has. So it's like, and with the first game, another connection is there are dragons still feature very heavily in this game, like they did the first game. So, like dragons are still a thing. So that's a connection at least. I'll give it that much.
Yeah.
So this game is a very interesting second life, I guess you might, I guess you might call it. So, the rights to Infogrames, of course, is Atari these days. Atari decided to actually Pico Interactive, who we've typed before on this podcast, a small one-man retro company, got the rights to the game among the game, and decided to inside 2019 to port the game to Windows, to Steam, because the game had only ever come out for Super NES. So Pico ported the game over. Atari released the game on Steam in 2019, and the game is basically a straight one-on-one port for the Super NES with a couple very small minor changes to the game. So the regular price of that game is $8. It's available for a bundle with Drakken for like $12.50, I think. But the game often goes on sale. I got it for like $2 during the last Steam sale. So if you want to play the game nowadays, and I do highly recommend playing the game. It's far cheaper and far easier to just pick up the version the Windows port of this game on Steam if you want to play it that way. Also, if you want to go physical, in 2022, Limited Run Games also did a very small reproduction cartridge manual run of the game as well too. So you also could buy it that way as well if you want to. So despite being kind of like a kind of forgotten game, the fact the game did receive a port and also a re-release in recent years does show it has a somewhat viable fan base behind it who do consider it to be a cult classic. And just my final thought on the game is just basically that, it's not Drakken at all. The style is very different. The tone's very different. The story's not very good at all, unfortunately. That's kind of the weakest part about the game, I think. But if you enjoy Drakken like I did, you're going to be disappointed. But if you take the game for what it is, as its own, it's a very solid, graphically pretty, fun action RPG game that kind of got overlooked and shouldn't be. I highly encourage anybody who is a fan of the style of the game to definitely check out either like the Steam port of the game or one of the or pick up the limited run release of the game, which can still be found on eBay, which we'll get the pricing here a little bit. So yeah, I definitely recommend playing this game if you are a fan of old school action RPGs for games a la Faxanadu, a la Zelda 2, that kind of stuff. If you enjoy those kinds of games, by all means check this game out. Just try to forget this game associated with Drakken in any way, shape, or form, and you'll be fine, I think. So Joe, you sound like I thought you also kind of enjoyed the game a good deal also, right?
I mean, I enjoyed it a lot more than Drakken.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, I recommend it. Like I said, just take your time with it. Do your exploration, and just, don't worry about the story. Like I said, the story's kind of, weak to begin with, but it's there. But it's all about the journey and the action that you encounter while you're on that journey. And this is a big recommendation for me.
Okay. Well, yeah, for sure. I was hoping that you liked the game even better. So I was glad to see that. So for sure. But so there is one code in this game to access the sound test if you want to. There is also, however, an interesting glitch in this game, which I don't know. Somehow this survived playtesting. I guess maybe they didn't. I'm not sure what happened about it, but if you beat the first boss, which is named I think it's pronounced like Brasilia.
Yep.
If you happen to make it to the Dragon's Room in the Artog Temple without either saving or reloading the game, which is why I guess this wasn't found during playtesting because seriously like who's going to do that, especially after beating especially after beating a boss. Once you go into that room, the game will glitch out. And what can happen to you depends upon a whole bunch of complicated factors, depending upon what's in the memory of that kind of stuff before getting there. You order games, the memory maps, and what they load up and whatever. But yeah, there's numerous glitches that can happen in this game, including seeing the credits play for you. So,
oh wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun glitch your fun glitch to mess around with. So I imagine the Steam port got that fixed because that's a pretty easy to reproduce bug if you know it's there kind of like thing. So
yeah,
I did not play that game myself far enough to test it in Steam, but I'm hoping it got fixed.
Well, from what I saw from the Steam reviews, it looks like it is a ROM playing off an emulator. So
yeah, that's all it pretty much is. Yeah. So just like
I mean, they might not have fixed it. It might just be a straight. Here's the ROM. Here's the. You know what I mean?
But yeah. Anyway, so. Anyway, the game can be found easily enough on eBay. 48 copies of the game were listed at the time of doing research. 21 copies of the game were recently sold. However, because like I said, the game didn't sell very well. So therefore, as a result, this is actually one of the more expensive Super NES games to pick up. If you want to get its original North American print run from 1994. So these prices include shipping from copies North America only. If you want proof this game didn't sell very well, carts of this game sold anywhere from $138 to $190. That's for the cart by itself.
Yeah.
So CIV copies can range anywhere from $327 to $555. So a very expensive game if you want to get the original print run. Actually, the limited run re-release. If you want a physical copy of the game, the limited run copies are much cheaper. You can get those for those sold anywhere on eBay anywhere from $82 to $110. So still not super cheap, but cheaper than the actual original print run.
Yeah.
If you really want to go physical and don't care about the story or whatever, or how the means to translate it, Japanese versions of the game can be are so much cheaper. Probably because the game's so much better in Japan. You can pick up a Japanese copy of the game for anywhere from $35 to $45. So, so if you want the game physically, you gotta pay for it. That's why I said getting the game on Steam is your best bet. Checking the game out if you want to play it, which both Joe and I definitely encourage you to do so.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is like collectors only pricing as far as pricing like this price ranges. So, but I don't know how much limited run sold the game for originally back in 2022. I didn't look that up, so I don't think that's But knowing how much their games usually sell for, I don't think $85 is like too much to ask for a game that's been out of print for like 3 years at this point.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe this article real quick here might mention what the original price point of it was. Oh, $60. Okay, yes, that's not too much of a markup then. But they also made the game into like a pretty good, like cool, like lime green cart, which is kind of like cool to look at. So
interesting.
They usually do that. They usually do that like other games, like different colors of the carts and whatever. So I think they differentiate it on purpose so that people like don't try to scam anybody stuff. But yeah, $60 back then, $87 plus up nowadays, and of course these are all complete because because the game was so with the box with the manual, and nobody's gonna break that up for eBay. So
right.
But anyway, yeah. So I mean, like the fact the game got re-released kind of does show that the game has kind of like gotten like a cult following over the years because I can see why. It's a very solid action RPG game. I think I probably enjoy this game more now than back when I first played it 30 years ago because 30 years ago, I was just bummed out it wasn't like Drakken, but
Right.
But nowadays, like I appreciate the game like what it is. So yeah, hopefully you do finish the game like your own, Joe.
Yeah, I plan on going back and finishing it for sure.
Yeah, but all right, so I think it's pretty much Drakken for you. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to say about the game?
No, you should play it. That's it.
Okay. Anyway, so next time on the podcast, we're going to be covering some lighter games for a change. I can make Joe happy here every once in a while to throw him a bone. So we're doing 2 wrestling games in one next time. We decided to cover them both on one podcast because I think you said, Joe, these games are pretty similar to one another gameplay. So
yep, they're pretty similar, and it is WrestleMania season. We'll actually be recording it the Monday after WrestleMania, so very very fitting.
Yes, I noticed the WrestleMania. Sorry, I noticed the wrestling Discord channels have been very active as of late. So
yes.
I guess there's like big stuff going on down. Yeah. So very like so for once we actually plan something like the appropriate timing. But yeah. So yeah, the two games that we're specifically going to be looking at are going to be WWF Super WrestleMania, which I think was the first WrestleMania game for the system.
Yes.
And then and then it's like spiritual sequel WWF Raw, which was the first Raw game. Is the Raw name still used today? I think it still is, right? There's still
no. It's been
retired for a while. Yeah,
WWE 2K whatever year since 2012, I think. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Nope. Okay. Had to realize that, but all right. So, yeah, and then at that point, there won't be very many wrestling games left in the system to cover after that. So,
yeah.
Anyway, so as always, we appreciate you joining us for our podcast. Questions, comments, feedback, suggestions can either be left in the Facebook group, or you can also send me an email directly to the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. Joe, where can I reach you at?
You can reach me on Twitter at JOESUX30. Also have a very public Facebook, and I do the Radical Retro Roundup, which we have moved to 2 months. Every 2 months, we're going to do that show now. So, and George picked a topic, and I can't remember what it is at this moment, but we're covering something. But I got till May to figure it out, so that's a plus. But yeah, pretty excited to be making that move. We did an episode on the GBA version of Lilo and Stitch this last time. That was fun to go through. It's basically Metal Slug. That's the best way to explain it. It's Metal Slug with Lilo and Stitch characters.
Okay,
it's actually,
interesting.
It's a really fun. It's really fun run and gun. And I just remembered George suggested we do Juiced, which I guess is a PS2/360 game.
I never heard.
Yeah, I guess it competed with like Need for Speed Underground. So
never heard of that one. Interesting. Okay.
I had heard of it, but never played it. So this is going to be an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking at the game. Yeah. Okay, it's a racing game. Okay. All right. So THQ/Activision did the game. So, but yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. The game was supposed to be published by Activision, but they went bankrupt before they could. So,
gotcha.
THQ eventually picked up the rights and released the game. So,
yeah. So I guess like the way he was explaining it is basically you can play the game like a traditional racer and race through the races and move up the ranks, but there's also an option, I guess, to where you can basically get so good that you can hire other drivers who race for you. And then you just basically sit back and everything is simulated and you just rake in money. So I was like, I'm going to play the game both ways and see what the hell happens.
Yeah. Well, the game got mixed average reviews, apparently, according to these ratings. So
yeah, that sounds about right.
The trouble development cycle of the game didn't apparently help things.
Yeah.
But, okay. Well, looking forward to that. So, All right, then. I guess that wraps things up for us. As always, stay safe, everybody. Be well. We'll catch you again next time. Then thinking of a game to play about your day.
Bye.
Take care.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep power.